Nafshi, afternoon shir, Beitsa, Daf Lamed Aleph, Amud Aleph. We're still in the sugya of a Mevi Eitzim, the person who wants to bring in wood from the outdoors into where he's, I suppose, cooking, heating. He needs wood on Yom Tov for cooking or heating. So he needs, obviously, wood that is not muksa. So obviously if he has it in his own storage house, then that solves the problem. But if he has it farther out, sort of more towards the wilderness, then he has a problem that officially things that come in from the outside are muksa. Even though wood on Shabbos, of course, would be the most classic type of muksa, like comparable to a rock, etc. But on Yom Tov there is a purpose that it has, it's just he has to make sure it's within his domain, as it were. So therefore he has to have his mind on it, he has to have thought about it, at least nominally, and obviously the more he has prepared it, the better. So we say if it's from a sadeh, it's an open area, and there's nothing pointing towards it being something he wants to use, so then he must have gathered it up from the day before, even if it's way out there in the field, but he's gathered it up, shows that he wants to use it the next day. So that already takes it out of the category of muksa. Whereas if it's in an enclosure, that's more within his realm, and depending on different various shitas that we've encountered, he can even take the wood that's been left scattered from the day before, and he hasn't done any proper preparation because, again, if it's in an enclosure, it's closer to being within his thoughts, within his mind, and therefore it's something he thinks to use, something he thinks to utilize. Then he doesn't have to consider it muksa. But there we have a machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi. As we know from the Gemora, this is all within one particular way of looking at Beis Hillel's shita, but that's what we're going in, so we'll just keep it simple right now. And they say that in order to gather up wood from being scattered within an enclosure, you need certain factors to be present. You either need it to be next to the city, and possibly even locked up, or according to Rabbi Yossi, being locked up is enough. But we have a question in the Gemora how much the two opposing views, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi, agree with each other. Do they completely disagree, which would be unusual? We usually find that Tanoim or Amorim who argue have a large section of intersection, and then they argue on a particular point, but not a wide variety of points. Whereas here, depending on how we read the Mishnah, we could have them agreeing for the most part and only disagreeing on one point, the way we said we normally like to see them argue. Or, if we adopt a more literal approach to the Mishnah, we could end up with a much wider divergence between them, with less point of contact. And therefore that's a more unusual form of a machlokes, where we find them widely divergent. Okay, so the Gemora gives the 2 points of view, how we could possibly look at Rabbi Yehuda and likewise Rabbi Yossi, depending on that, and we have these options that the Gemora speaks about based on 2 ways of reading the Mishnah. And Rashi gives his sort of approach to how to understand the Gemora, both in the question and the answer. And we were going through the Rashis to try to figure out the final answer of the Gemora. So do you want to continue with the Rashis?
Yeah, I think so. We'll try.
Okay, so we have the 2 possibilities. Either he meant when he said, when Yehuda said Samach Le'ir, that has to be adjacent to the city, the enclosure has to be adjacent to the city in order to be lenient and allow you to pick up the scattered wood, which hasn't been prepared. did he mean, but it has to be also locked or even unlocked? So we said possibly he meant only adjacent. He did not have a particular need for it to be locked. And that's why he only stated that factor in the Mishnah, the fact that it has to be samach. And then Rabbi Yossi's coming along to say it's only dependent on whether it's locked, and it's not dependent at all on whether it's next to the city. So we could do that Rashi, or I can't remember if we did that, and then we can go on to the next approach.
The next approach would be where he says he doesn't mention the locked in the Mishnah, but assumes that we know that it's locked. If it's smooth,
that's the first approach.
It's the first approach, right?
Right. So those, each one has a Rashi attached to it. The first one's a bit longer and the second one's shorter. So if you want to go through that, or we could just go right to the answer of the Gemora, but it's up to you.
All right.
Shalom Aleichem, how are you? Good to see you.
Nice to see you.
The guy that I was going to ask about your he wasn't available today.
Wasn't available?
So I left a note on my telephone to get
Okay.
hold of him tomorrow.
All right, that's
Sorry
fine.
about that.
That's good. Thank you. Thank you.
I did get
I
your
mean, I
message.
had this for years already, so another day is not gonna.
Okay. I did get your message. Then.
Yeah. Okay. Good. That's great.
By the way, going to work this morning was a nightmare. His pens closed the whole place down. It was a nightmare.
Is it better now?
Well, no, it's okay because I mean I don't want
He's
to
still
slow
here.
down on that side. Yes, he's here for
He's
sure.
still here. He's still here till tomorrow.
He's
Yeah.
come out so positive for us. It's unbelievable. He's so strong.
Right. Right. Thank God.
Very strong.
So,
He's like this, the female representative to the United Nations. He's another
Hillel.
yeah, he's another sheriff in town, this guy.
yeah, well, the
Amazing.
hard part of the fact is that the Arabs are making it sound like they don't want to deal now with America, but
That's
obviously they don't like taking the millions of dollars.
No.
You don't bite the hand that feeds you.
So they already got half of their money taken away. Let's see if we can get the rest taken away.
I think so.
All right. In the meantime,
So sorry, the first approach, the second approach is Rabbi Yehuda doesn't mention this in the Mishnah, but as soon as you know that it needs to be, even though it's multi-city, that he knows that it has, everyone knows that it has to be.
right.
And the second approach, where it says whether it's with a key or without a key,
He didn't mention it because he doesn't care about
he
it.
doesn't care about it at all.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then Rabbi Yossi,
He
that's
cares
all he
about
cares about, according
Yeah,
to
he
the
cares
second
about
approach.
So he, without a lock, he would not allow you to
Who's
take
he?
it. The Rabbi Yossi wouldn't allow you to take it whether it was
Right.
close, whether it was far.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so the question of the Gemora is clear. Now we just have to get to the answer, which is a bit terse. And that's going to take a little bit more work. There's a Rosh we've already gone through. We'll have to go through it again. Okay, so let's maybe go down to the Tashma in the Gemora. Right?
Here.
Yeah. Where we're trying to bring a proof to answer our question. Perhaps the first approach is the right approach, perhaps the second one. Usually it will bring in another Mishnah or another Beitsa to try to prove the point, but in this case it's really just bringing in the wording of our Mishnah and trying to be a little bit more precise within the words that are presented. So the Gemora says Tashma. You want to try it, Tuvia?
Now, I can try it. Tash, this one here, right? Tasha Medakne Nidkatane.
Mid
Nidkatane.
katana. Now mid as a prefix is very important Gemora prefix.
From that.
Literally it means from that, but in the real give and take of Gemora, or similar to when, let's say, a person would be trying to prove an argument, even in real life, he would say from the fact that.
From the fact
That's how you prove something. You say, look, from the fact that we see blah, 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 you have to admit that I'm right. So it's honing in on the detail, which is the most telling detail.
I see. Okay.
So Midikatani,
from the fact that the Mishnah taught,
right, the following words. Now it's going to quote, and from the Gemora it's not clear what part of this quote is so telling. From Rashi, thank God, which is not a short Rashi, but eventually, if you read Rashi enough, you see what the Gemora is driving at here. But let's just read the Gemora anyways, just so we've got the Gemora under our belt. What is the Gemora Medaya? Because it says in the Mishnah,
Rabbi Yossi Omer, Kol shenichasin lo b'potachas, v'afilu b'toch tchum Shabbat.
Wait, so that's all we did so far was just bring the words of Rabbi Yossi. If you look back at the Mishnah, we're just saying, word for word what he says in the Mishnah. But it's saying, since he said that in the Mishnah, that's going to be our proof. That itself is our proof. What?
Shema Mina.
Which means,
learn from this.
It's almost a command, like Shema Yisrael is hear, O Israel, right? It's telling you to listen. So Shema Mina, you must hear from this, you must conclude from this.
Rabbi Yossi Tarte Lekula Kamar.
Shema Mina. It repeats the word Shema Mina as if to say, you hear from this, blah, 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 this is what you hear.
Yeah.
In other words, you must conclude this as the conclusion. That's very much understood to be a wording of conclusion, like a conclusion of the Gemora.
I see.
Sometimes the Gemora will just say Shema Mina this, and then the Gemora might argue. When it says Shema Mina twice, it's kind of like a knockout punch.
You better learn.
Right. It's like the referee counting to 10 and then banging his hand on the canvas. Yeah, it's like, but here, it's not that we're knocking out a person's view. We had a question, a legitimate question. Do we read the Mishnah like this, or do we read the Mishnah like that? Now we feel we've proven it conclusively. Ironically, from where do we prove it? Just the very words of the Mishnah itself. But somehow or other, the Mishnah the Gemara feels that from those very words of the Mishnah of Rabbi Yossi, that'll be able to teach us fully what Rabbi Yossi holds, and also it must reflect back on Rabbi Yehuda as well, because that was part of the question.
Yeah.
What does Rabbi Yehuda really feel? What does he really hold? And then we also need to know what Rabbi Yossi holds, but they're connected. So the Gemara, the answer here is only discussing Rabbi Yossi, so we have to say, and whenever it does that, it means, and that will reflect back on Rabbi Yehuda as well. So both questions are difficult to understand. The Gemara is very, I would even be tempted to call it obtuse, because all it's doing is bringing the very words of the Mishnah itself, which we knew already. It's not like it's bringing something we didn't know. And it's like saying, but you didn't think about it enough. I'm putting it out here right in front of you now, but now that you thought about it a second time, for some reason it's more convincing just seeing it a second time now, and that teaches us a whole new way of looking at the real way of looking at Rabbi Yossi. And then, which the Gemara doesn't discuss, but Rashi does, Baruch Hashem, how does that reflect back on Rabbi Yehuda as well? So what's the real proof to Rabbi Yossi? We have to see in Rashi what's that all about? What do we get from just quoting the Mishnah again? And then once we know Rabbi Yossi, what does it mean he had two kulas? What do you mean he has two kulas? Well, what are the two kulas? What are we talking about with two kulas? And how does that reflect back on Rabbi Yehuda, which is actually, if you look back in the Gemora, that was the real question. Okay? Anyone tell us what you learned from our scroll?
No, I don't learn anything from our scroll, but he says...
Looks like you're perusing.
Well, I'm perusing, but I didn't say I learned anything.
Well, I hope when you look at it, you learn something.
Well, he says, he rules leniently when the enclosure, one, is locked, even if it is far from town, and when it is near town, even if it is not locked.
Okay, so let's put it this way. Rabbi Yossi's real uniqueness is not in the two kulas, because one of those, I would say, Rabbi Yehuda holds up as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
when you ask the question, what does it say about Rabbi Yehuda, that's probably what it is.
Right. But, so it seems that if this is the real answer, it's saying, really, Rabbi Yossi, all he needs is locked.
Yeah.
That's like the second way of looking at things. That's how we call that the second approach. When the Gemora laid out the question, that was the second approach. So then we say he doesn't care about anything but whether it's locked or not, whereas Rabbi Yehuda, all he cares about is no. So it's not exactly like that. No, excuse me. Rabbi Yossi says, if it's locked, I'll let you get away with being far away from the city. So that's one kula.
Right.
And then he says, but if it's close to the city, I'll let you get away with another kula, that's it doesn't have to be locked. So he doesn't, it's not exactly the second way approach either then. It's a new approach, it's a third approach really. It's saying Rabbi Yossi would need one or the other, either locked or next to the city. And if it's locked, he'll let you get away with it being far away. If it's next to the city, he'll let you get away without it being locked.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the two kulas in Rabbi Yossi. Then in Rabbi Yehuda, we'd have to say that what he meant was it only has to be close to the city, and then it doesn't have to be locked, which is in truth what Rabbi Yossi agrees to as well. So that point is not really a machlokus. It's merely that Rabbi Yehuda says if it's next to the city, I don't need it to be locked, and Rabbi Yossi agrees to that. But then Rabbi Yossi adds one more kula that if it's locked, it can be far away as well. That Rabbi Yehuda doesn't hold it. All right, shall we see the Rashi then? Or is there something to talk about before we see the Rashi?
No, I think it's okay.
All right, Shabbatai, you want to try the Rashi?
Where?
Tarti kula, tarti likula kama.
So two leniencies, as we say.
No, as, not as.
No?
Yeah, that's not as. He did say. He in fact said.
Right.
This is how to look at him. He in fact did say two kulas.
Ken Omar. That is what it is to say.
Lomar means that is to say.
Right.
Meaning don't take this literally. It's not exactly two kulas in the normal sense of the word. It's a bit of an expression. What does it mean?
Rabbi Yossi.
There we have the mid prefix again.
From that Rabbi Yossi.
What?
From the fact that Rabbi Yossi.
Yeah, from the fact that he what?
Here,
no. So here the word fact wouldn't be proper then. I think it's just saying from that of Rabbi Yossi. That was from the words of Rabbi Yossi, from the shita of Rabbi Yossi. We can then Rabbi Yehuda. So why is Rashi calling that kolomar? You know what Rashi means here with the kolomar? Because what was the original question of the Gemora? In Rabbi Yossi or in Rabbi Yehuda?
Rabbi Yehuda.
In Rabbi Yehuda.
Yeah.
Whereas two ways of looking at it were really more involved in Rabbi Yehuda than anything, but okay, whatever. At least it did involve Rabbi Yehuda. And the answer is just an answer in Rabbi Yossi that's pretty strange. So Rashi says, no. Kolomar, that is to say, we're going to tell you about Rabbi Yossi, but from Rabbi Yossi's words and Shita, we can then work back to Rabbi Yehuda. So don't worry, we're not ignoring one half of the question. We're going to answer the whole question. When we say we're going to tell you what Rabbi Yossi holds, that's not because we don't care what Rabbi Yehuda holds and we're ignoring that part of the question. It's from that now we're going to lay out Shita's Rabbi Yossi, you'll be able to figure out on your own Rabbi Yehuda. So we will have answered both aspects of the question. How does Rabbi Yehuda hold and how does Rabbi Yossi hold? That seemed to bother Rashi. Why are you only focusing on Rabbi Yossi when the question involved both Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi? We say no, that's okay. That's what it means. And Gemora means that it's going to get to both. Through Rabbi Yossi, we'll get to Rabbi Yehuda. Why?
That they both don't hold.
No, boy is singular.
They
Boy is singular, so it's not they hold. Not saying they hold. Really the verb is boy. Let's start with that. Boy.
He.
But boy is a verb. Say the verb. He's a pronoun.
To want, to need.
That's infinitive. I'm not saying it's an infinitive. Right? Shabbatai eats. I'm using a verb with Shabbatai. I'm not saying Shabbatai likes to eat.
Needs.
I'm saying he eats. Yes, so he needs. Okay? Now let's add the other words. Lav tarvayu boy.
They don't need.
No, now you get one back to they.
What's tarvayu? It's both of them.
But first the verb. First the subject, verb, predicate, right? That's how a sentence works. Subject, verb, predicate, right? Remember back in 7th grade? I'm always thankful to my 7th grade homeroom teacher, also taught us grammar. That forever and ever. At least I imagine in my mind she's the one I have to blame for the fact that I know a bit of
predicate
grammar.
is really the object, right? So
Excuse me?
predicate is really the object.
Yes,
The
that's-
verb is part of the predicate.
No, subject, verb, predicate. It's always three things. Sean ran to the store. John is the subject, ran is the verb, to the store is the predicate. What? John ran to what? Well, John read the book. Juvia drove his car.
That's
subject, verb, predicate.
yeah. In that case, the predicate is the object when it's his car. But if it's ran to drive his car, then the predicate is an infinitive.
Okay, this is where I'm not as much of a grammarian as you might think.
Yeah.
But my main thing is to get you focused when you read a Hebrew sentence to
Yeah.
try to realize that I have to look at this in a way that I can say a normal English sentence.
Yeah.
The only way I can get you to focus on is to realize, first figure out the verb, right? And therefore you won't say lav tarvayu before the word boy. In your translation you'll say boy first, because that's both the subject and the verb.
Right.
He needs.
Yeah.
Now what does he need? Lav tarvayu. He needs lav tarvayu. Let's try to say that. Just get it out in the open, how that would sound, even in the roughest sense of the word. How would you say that? Without falling into the pit.
What happens if you're in the pit already?
Yeah.
Climb out.
Yeah.
We're here to pull you out.
It's like it's stamped in already. It's difficult to get out of that now. So he doesn't need the love.
Okay, we'll get the law. We'll make it a better sentence in a minute, but just say it as I would have you say it. He needs
both.
not.
Not both.
Right. He needs not both. Now, let's make it that's not a proper English sentence, but at least it gets us on track. Now I'm on track. I know I'm talking about one person either needing both or not needing both. That was really the question, it turns out. So Rashi says he needs not both, or we'd say that in English differently, but at least now I know what we're saying. I know the basic thing I'm trying to say. He doesn't need both, right? He doesn't need both. Now, who's the he? I always say that pronouns are your worst enemy in learning, because if you keep it as a pronoun, you'll never understand who's doing the talking, who it's talking about. Often, very, very ambiguous terminology. So, even though it lends itself to using a pronoun, try to put it back into the proper noun aspect. Want me to store your phone somewhere?
No, my wife says I should keep it there.
Yeah.
Because she's going to send me a very important text.
Oh my gosh. That Pence is visiting?
That's why. No,
Pence is visiting?
no, you have to make a Shiva call. But that's why usually I just keep it here and ignore it.
Alright. Can't ignore the boss.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's try it again. Who do you think the he is?
Rabbi Yehuda.
Right, because that's what he now said. He said, from Rabbi Yosef we can hear Rabbi Yehuda. And what are we going to learn about Rabbi Yehuda, says Rashi? The lav tarvayu boy, that he, Rabbi Yehuda, doesn't need both. And that's a big breakthrough. Because that was our big question. Does he need both or does he not need both?
Kula is he talking about?
No. Here he's actually talking about needing a quality. In order to let you be lenient to gather in scattered wood, right? We know if you pile up the wood, everyone's happy. But if you leave it scattered, it's a big question whether you can be lenient and allow a guy to gather up scattered wood, because maybe it's still muksa. Right? That's the whole question. Can we be lenient and let you gather the scattered wood, assuming it's not muksa anymore, or do we have to be machmir and say, no, I believe it's still muksa? So we said, first of all, if it's an enclosure, you're halfway there. But maybe that's not the end of the story. Maybe I need an enclosure of a certain type to allow you to gather in the scattered wood, right? So let's put it this way. Everyone requires an enclosure, right? That everybody in the world agrees that if you don't have it in an enclosure, if it's out in an open field, you cannot gather scattered wood. There's no way to be lenient. There's no...
But you don't have to knock it up.
If it's in an open field, right? So now, so I know I need an enclosure. That's, let's say everybody agrees on that. That's not even part of this Rashi. I'm just saying that gives you an idea of what the word need is in this context. In order to be lenient, to allow you to gather up scattered wood, I know I need, the first thing I for sure need, according to everybody under the sun, is an enclosure, right? The discussion doesn't even start if you don't have an enclosure. But now the second question is, do I need that enclosure to have certain qualities, again, to allow you to gather up the scattered wood? So we know that Rabbi Yehuda needs it to be samuch. That's a factor he needs, a quality he needs, in order to let go and let you be lenient and gather in the scattered wood. Right? But does he also need it to be locked? So we're saying no, he doesn't. Rabbi Yehuda does not need two factors to be in order to be lenient. He only needs one factor in order to be lenient. Which factor does he need to be allow you to be lenient?
Smuch.
Now the enclosure has to be samuch.
Yeah.
Okay? And
Rabbi Yossi Tartel Hakil.
right, so now it's going in the opposite direction. Before, just a minute ago he was talking about Rabbi Yehuda needing or not needing both factors. And now he's switching a bit the terminology. He's not talking about needing factors. He's talking about being makel into things. In other words, the kula of gathering up wood. That's a kula, right? Some people say think Beis Shammai won't ever let you gather up wood, right? But let's say that there is a shita that allowing you to gather up the wood, but they say in order to do that you have to have certain factors. But they say, I'll let you be makel to gather up the wood in two different situations. So Batarti Akil, he'll be makel in two situations to let you gather up the wood. What is that? Machshir.
The Machshir is Samuch. That is
So
good.
Tuvi, he's a machshir.
Yeah, it's good. It's
Machshir means he allows it to be good, right? He declares it to be good, like he puts the stamp Tuvia on it, right?
It's close.
You have your own stamp?
I haven't got a stamp, but I have two dots that have my name on.
All right, well, I need you to have a stamp. So.
I wanted
Stamp.
in Ottawa when I was there at the class shoot. I wanted them to make me a ring with a stamp.
Wow, that's
So I
good.
can go to someplace and give it a hexer for 2 hours. I go have a meal and I throw out a hexer and eat.
I thought you were going to say that if a guy gets in a fight with you and you punch him, it'll always say a hexer on his cheek.
That's another idea.
Okay.
But they wouldn't make me that ring. I could never understand.
All right. Maybe the guy here, you're doing him a favor. He might have give you a ring.
That's right.
All right. Now, so here he's machshir. He declares it to be good. He declares it to be fit. Fit in our case means allowing you to gather up wood in that enclosure. If besamuch,
Besamuch, yeah.
if it's samuch, that's one kula. He'll allow you to do it if it's samuch,
Below Petachas.
even if it doesn't have a key or a lock and key. And a second kula he will allow.
Petachas below Samuch.
Ibit potachas means in a situation that has, or in an enclosure which has a lock and key, he's also willing to be makel to let you gather in the scattered wood, even...
Without a lock.
No, that's bit posachas. If it has a lock and key, then he'll allow you to be makel to gather up the wood,
If it's not close.
even if it's not close to the city. Okay? So that's what it means in our Gemora. Trey Kuli, right? Trey Lakula means two situations where he'll allow you to be makel and gather in the wood. if it's samuch, even without it being locked, and that happens to be Rabbi Huda agrees, and even if it's not samuch, but then it has to be locked. And in both cases, he's being mekel in one factor. When it's samuch, he doesn't need it to be locked. When it's locked, he doesn't need it to be samuch. Now, that's all like a bottom line type of thing. Rashi just went to the bottom line. Now Rashi has to backtrack and tell you, how does that actually come out of these words from the Mishnah? As we said before, we didn't know how to read the Mishnah, and then it tells us, you know what? From these words of Rabbi Yossi, now you know how to read the Mishnah. How do we get that? How do we get that? We were stymied by how to read the Mishnah. Now you're telling me, you know how to read the Mishnah? Just read the Mishnah. Seems like a bit of a circular argument. But anyhow, so Rashi's now going to explain to you what, even though you and I might not have seen that in the actual words of the Gemora, thank God there's a Rashi, but with the Rashi now we understand what the Gemora really did with those words of Rabbi Yossi, that it revealed, everything became revealed through those words. Now Rashi's going to go back and tell you. So far he just told us the bottom line. Bottom line, we're coming out with knowing about Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi. What do we know about Rabbi Yehuda? We know about Rabbi Yehuda from Rabbi Yossi. But after all is said and done, we say by Rabbi Yehuda, he only needs one factor. What's the one factor he needs? Samuch. Then he allows you to gather in the wood from the enclosure. And Rabbi Yossi's mekel in two, that he says, I agree with you, Rabbi Yehuda. If it's samuch, I can let you gather it in without it being locked up. But if it's locked up, then I allow you to gather it from farther away from the city as well. Of course, within an enclosure. Okay, so says, now Rashi's got to tell us, how does that all come out of the words that Rabbi Yossi says in the Mishnah? Okay? I think he's going to say it with the word dishma inan.
Yeah, dishma inan le Rabbi Yehuda.
We hear all of what Rabbi Yehuda holds.
Kama kol shesamuch le'ir bein de litlei potachat.
Itlei.
Litlei potachat. Bein de litlei.
Lately.
The litlei potachat. So he says, if you hear from Rabbi Yehuda.
Now, the funny thing about this Rashi is, it seems like Rashi's now being medayek the words of Rabbi Yehuda, which is interesting, because the Gemora did not do that. Rashi's adding sort of like a bonus here. Something from the Gemora, I would have thought the Gemora doesn't really have any way of being medayek the words of Rabbi Yehuda, because it jumped right to Rabbi Yossi, and as Rashi said before, from Rabbi Yossi we'll go learn to Rabbi Yehuda. Now Rashi's actually saying from the words of Rabbi Yehuda we do have a bit of a clue. What? Because he said the word kol. Right? Since he said kol, that's anything that's samuch, turns out that is going to be very telling. Did you daven mincha yet? You may want to jump in. I think they may be davening now.
It's early? Isn't it early?
Oh, I don't know. No, it's not yet.
My watch says...
Okay, sorry. I was looking at the clock for without my glasses. It looked like it was already. And I also thought I heard the guy in the next room. You're right. Okay, as long as you're keeping track. Okay, so let's continue in the Rashi. So since he said kol, what is he really saying? Any case of an enclosure, obviously, that is next to the city, I allow. Which implies, any case implies, I don't care whether it's
Locked or not.
Locked or not. Okay? So again, that's not conclusive. Because Rashi said before, maybe he meant locked, because maybe the normal enclosure is locked. Remember Rashi said that? The stam one is locked, so maybe that's what he meant when he said anything that's samuch. Of course it has to be locked, because the normal case is locked. But Rashi saying, the words definitely imply any case of samuch is good, implying both locked and unlocked. Then, Amar le Rabbi Yossi.
Kol sheyesh lo potachat.
He also used the word kol, which also is a telling word, because as if to say, any case of something that's posachas, I'll let you do.
Afilu hi betoch hatum
Tichum.
Shabbos or tichum. Even that which is inside the tichum.
Right. Meaning even if it's far away from the city, as long as it is within the tichum. Right? So that implies the first thing about Rabbi Yossi, which we knew already, that as long as it's locked, then he allows it with anywhere within the Tuchum.
That's his leniency, right? That's his leniency.
That's one of his leniencies. Right, now Rosh is going to start to do his tap dance. How do we know in Rabbi Yossi that if it's close to the city, he still doesn't need a posachas? Because we could have learned in his words that he's saying you always need a posachas. Any case that I'll let you use is only with a posachas. Like you could read the Mishnah that way. Rashi is saying no. If you really think about it, you cannot read the Mishnah that way. That's why the Gemora quoted Rabbi Yossi again, because if you really think about it, when he said his words, it implied that yes, if it has a posachas, you can do it when it's far away. But if it doesn't have a posachas, he'll still allow it when it's close. Rashi says, how do I know that? Because if Rabbi Yossi
uses the lock dependent, or
he depends everything. In other words, he makes everything dependent on that lock. If that's a real sheet of Rabbi Yossi, it always depends on the lock. You have a lock, fine. You don't have a lock, no, not fine. If that's true in Rabbi Yossi, that everything hinges, excuse the expression, on that lock, then we have a problem, Rashi is going to say. Why? If that would really be his way of thinking, we have a problem. Why? No, that is Tala Taima.
So it depends on the...
No, not depends. He makes it dependent. He makes it dependent. He hangs it on that tom. If he says everything depends on that reasoning, that's his shita. Everything depends on, it hangs on that sheet, on that point of whether it's posachas.
Even if it's close.
Then it would be
the filu who samuch.
Boy posachas. Then it would certainly be true that you also need it to be locked and everything when it's close. Then here it goes. Here's the big clincher. Then you know what he would have said?
He needs it locked.
He would have said, Lo havele l'siyumi, which means
finishing.
Lo havele. Now, even in Hebrew, there's such an expression. Hayalo ledaber. Hayalo. Hayalo.
He didn't need.
Right, what is it? To say someone had an opportunity would be one interpretation, but it really means had the necessity. Right? He should have, in other words. He should have, hayalo means he should have, or lo hayalo, havale means he should not have. L'siyumi. What does l'siyumi means? Like we make a siyum. What's a siyum? To finish something off.
Yeah.
To complete. So he should never have completed his sentence with those final words of Vafilu Soch Tuchum Shabbos. Right? Those 4 words. Vafilu Soch Tuchum Shabbos. Rosh is now claiming those words are extra if he really always needs it to be locked. No matter where it is, he needs it to be locked. So then why mention these 4 words? Okay? Now, I think the last time we read this, it didn't quite click the first time around to think about it. But I think Rashi goes on to explain it a bit more. So let's go on. He shouldn't have said that. What should he have said? Ella, rather. To whom is the first word on the line?
He should have said.
Rather, if, again, this is all predicated on, if the only thing he needs is a lock, and then it doesn't, even when it's next to the city, he needs a lock, right? Then he shouldn't have talked about, at the end about it being besoch l'tuchum. Rather, Rashi says, well, the only thing he really needed to say, hachi havalei lamim. This is what he really should have said. What?
the tachatz.
That's all he had to say.
Everyone enters.
No. Any enclosure. Kol here means enclosure. Any enclosure. The word enclosure is implied. Because that was the question. Which karpef are you going to allow? This one says this kind of karpef. This one says this kind of karpef. It says kol, any karpef, any enclosure that you go into it with a posachas. That in order to enter it, you need a key. Meaning it's under lock and key. So that's all he really should have said according to Rashi. If he always needs it to have a lock and key, then that's what he should have said. You know what you need? What the Gemora asked, what the Mishnah asked. What do you need in order to gather up wood in there? You need it to be a kind of an enclosure that opens and closes with a posachas. Then what?
Okay,
Tekivan.
it says the Tani
Kol, because then I would have used the word kol, since he used the word kol, Hava mashma, which is like saying Haya mashma.
Understand.
It would have been understood. From that one word, it would have been already understood.
The tzarich patachat samuch.
Samuch or rachok.
It needs a key whether it's near or whether it's
Right, because if you really need a key all the time, no matter what, then just say, you know what I need? I need it always to have a key. I need it to always be under lock and key. I already understand from that that no matter where it is, close, far, this, that, and the other, I need a key. So if he really needed a key when it's samuch, then he should have just said that. Any case that has opens and closes with a key is the one I allow. Then I already know that if it's close, it needs it. If it's far, it needs it. Of course, anywhere. That's what I would have thought, even without the final words of what Rabbi Yossi says.
What do I need for you to finish?
Why do we need those last few words of his sentence, where he ends up saying those last four cryptic words, Afila b'soch tichum Shabbos, right? Because all he really needs to say, I need a posachas, and then I'll know everything. Next to the city I need it, far away I need it, everywhere I need it, but everywhere it'll be enough as well. So then I don't need to tell you anywhere within the Tichum Shabbos. That's a given that you're talking within the Tichum Shabbos. Ella, so now Rashi says, if I just prove to you beyond a shadow of a doubt that those four words are extra, then why did he use those four words? That's what Rashi's trying to prove here. Ella, rather, why did he use those last four words? Le'ashmo'inan, in order to teach us the mishrei she'ein samuch. Let's use the Eino Elo method, right? Not that he doesn't need Ella, but rather he only needs a posachas to permit a case that's what? Besoch tuchum, that's far away. That's why he included those last few words, because he's trying to put it together. If you have a posachas, then I allow you anywhere. That means I only need a posachas for the faraway places that are within the tichum. That's why he included those last few words, to tell you that when I'm mentioning posachas, you should know I'm only mentioning it in conjunction with that idea of besoch the tichum, which is like saying far away from the city. Far away from the city, but of course within the tichum. So by adding those last few words about within the tichum, he's linking the posachas together with that. When do I need a posachas? When it's besoch tichum, when it's far away from the city, but within the tichum. That's when I need a posachas. And from that I can hear the flip side as well, that if it's next to the city, I don't need a posachas. So that's what clues me in the end of the day, to the real shita of Rabbi Yossi. That's why the Gemora quoted that entire sentence, so all the 8 words of the sentence, not just the first 4 or the last 4. All of them together combined to teach me his real shita. Because with the first part I say I already would have known that he needs a posachas anywhere. But by adding the last 4 words, it clues me in that no, it's not really that way. He only needs a posachas if it's far away. Okay.
Rabbi Yehuda.
Now we have Rabbi Yossi clear. He is clear from both parts of what he said, that he only needs a posach if it's far away, which the flip side means that if it's next to the city, he doesn't need a posachas. Now we can work backwards to Rabbi Yehuda.
Let's see if they're good.
Okay.
Rabbi Yehuda the Loboi party. Rabbi Yehuda, he doesn't need both.
How do we know that? Now that he made that assertion, but now he's got to prove it. He already did allude to it before, but now he's got to. Now this part of the Rosh is getting much more into the details of how we know for certain these facts. So he's saying, how do we know for certain that Rabbi Yehuda doesn't need posachas if it's next to it?
Nami Moresha.
Did Rabbi Yossi Amina? It's from the Resha of Rabbi Yossi we hear it. Okay? So we focused mostly on the last 4 words of Rabbi Yossi a moment ago. But now we're going to go back to the first few words of Rabbi Yossi. And as we said before, once we tell you what Rabbi Yossi is saying, you'll be able to understand Rabbi Yehuda. Because after all, Rabbi Yossi was talking to Rabbi Yehuda. So whatever Rabbi Yehuda said, and then we hear Rabbi Yossi answering him in a certain way, we'll know what Rabbi Yehuda must have really said then. So now we're going to get into the first few words of Rabbi Yossi, and from that we're going to infer back to what Rabbi Yehuda must hold. Midid Nokat. From the fact that he mentioned, or he decided to specifically use certain words of Nichnasim La B'Posachas. Any case of an enclosure which opens with a lock or opens with a key, since he used that term,
everything, since that all of them need a key.
Now, wait a minute. He's playing, I think, the devil's advocate here. He's saying, if it would really be true, right, that Rabbi Yehuda also needs a posachas. And you remember why Rashi said originally he didn't mention posachas?
He assumed that we knew it.
Because everyone normally has it. A normal corral, or whatever you want to call it, has it. Right? So if the reason why he didn't mention it was because every normal one has it, and therefore obviously it has to have that, because we didn't talk about it, obviously it has to have it. But that's what he's saying. If that's really true, then you could say, since all of them have a posachas, which is all included in the supposition, right? In the supposition that Rabbi Yehuda requires it, is because they all have it. If they all have it, he's saying, then think about it. Kivan dekulu posachas islu. Since if you're really right that all of them have it,
that was the word used before. Tsama.
It's like the stam case, right?
Okay.
Then iboy le lemisni. Now he's using this term now. Iboy le lemisni. He said a few moments ago, have le lemisni. It's the same kind of a thing. He should have done something. He should have used a certain wording, right? This is the same as if you look back in the Rashi, he kept using the term hava le lemisni. That's the same as iboy le lemisni. The idea that he should have done something. He should have said it a certain way. So he's saying, if they all have it, then what he should have said was... Right. So he's saying like this. If Rabbi Yehuda was already talking about a posachas, why was he talking about a posachas, even though he didn't mention it? Because they all have it. Oh, they all have it? Then when Rabbi Yossi shows up on the scene, he doesn't need to mention it. Because if they all have it, then why mention it? You just told me you don't need to mention if they all have it. So, wait a minute. Then why did Rabbi Yossi mention it? He really could have just come along and said, you're saying it has to be next to the city with a posachas, but you're not mentioning it because you don't need to mention it because they all have it. But you're saying it needs to be next to the city with a posachas. Oh, and I'm saying it doesn't need to be next to the city with the posachas. right? But I don't need to mention it either. That's what Rashi's saying. Brilliant. The whole supposition that Rabbi Yehuda meant it, but he didn't say it, is because they all have it.
Right.
Then just like Rabbi Yehuda can get away without saying it, but he means it,
Right.
then Rabbi Yossi could have gotten away without saying it and mean it. Just
Yeah.
like,
But
just
he
like
said it though.
what?
Rabbi Yossi said it though.
Yeah, that's the point. His saying it clues you into the fact that they don't all have it. And if you really mean it, you have to say it. Ah, if that's true, then go back to Rabbi Yehuda. He didn't mention it. And now I know the truth. They don't really all have it. Mm-hmm. And you only mention it if you need it. And he didn't mention it. So now I know the truth. I know the truth. He didn't mention it because he doesn't need it. Brilliant.
I'm trying to work out.
No, long Rashi must have thought of this.
I'm trying to work out.
We're so terse. And Rashi has this entire. And Rashi has a few different logics in the words that like it all is Rashi. It's all Rashi unless Rashi got it from his Rebbe or something. It's unbelievable. Unbelievable.
I'm pleased to see it. I'm having trouble.
I'm pleased that you're pleased.
But I'm having trouble seeing it.
Okay, so let's go.
Can you re-explain that a little bit more?
Okay, so let's just go back. The very supposition of everything is that Rabbi Yehuda really might need two. He only mentions some, but he really needs both.
Right.
But Rashi already made it clear. That only can be true if you assume that all normal enclosures have a posachas.
Right, right,
And the reason why I didn't mention it is because you don't need to mention it.
right. I got that.
So then Rashi's saying here, if that's really true, then we look at Rabbi Yehuda as saying the following. In other words, we're playing devil's advocate. Let's assume you're right for a moment. Then let's just play it out. We'll play it out like this. Rabbi Yehuda said it needs to be next to the city. And he also implied it needs a posachas. When did he imply that? Because everyone has a posachas. And of course he didn't need to mention it because they all have it. But Rashi's saying now, if that's really true, then just like Rabbi Yehuda didn't need to say it, Rabbi Yossi also didn't need to say it. Because all he really needed to say was that you needed to be samuch with the posachas. I say it can be even far away with the posachas. That's all I needed to say.
So why did he say?
Because they don't all really have a posachas. That was a fake news, like they call it today, right? That was fake news.
I mean,
That was a supposition that was incorrect. Now we finally see the fallacy of that. It can't be true. Because if it would really be true, then by the same token that Rabbi Yehuda didn't need to mention it, neither did Rabbi Yossi actually have to mention it. Because all he really needed to say is, you and I both see eye to eye on this one fact, that every enclosure has a posachas. Just you're telling me you needed to have the posachas and be close. And I'm coming along and saying it can be far away with the posachas. So all he really needed to say was it can be far away.
Very so.
No. Rabbi Yehuda says it needs to be close, but he means with the posachas.
No, that's clear. Yeah.
So Rabbi Yossi, if he really wants to argue, all he has to do is say, no, it can be far away. And we know he means with the posachas.
Oh, wow. Wait a minute. Okay. Okay, so he's saying it doesn't need to be close. But because it's far away, it needs a key.
No, not because it's far away.
No.
They all have keys. Even close, Rabbi Yehuda said you need a key.
No, it's Rabbi Yehuda.
But now Rabbi Yossi's saying to him, okay,
Yeah.
I think it could be far away. Right?
Right.
Just like you, but far away.
Right.
Just like you said it needs to have a posachas,
Right.
but I'm saying far away. So since I'm not arguing with you about the posachas issue, you say it needs a posachas, I say it needs a posachas. The only difference is you're saying it needs a posachas and it has to be close, and I'm saying it needs a posachas but it can be far away. So if we're both agreeing on that point, just like you don't have to mention it, I don't have to mention it. It's not the main contention between us. What's the contention between us? Does it have to be close or far away? Because everyone agrees it has to be posachas, if that's really true. Again, Rabbi Yehuda says it has to be close.
Rabbi Yehuda says it has to be close. By not mentioning it that it has a key, assumes that everyone knows that.
Now that's a supposition. We're testing that supposition out.
Right.
Do you really think that's true that when Rabbi Yehuda said it needs to be close, he meant with a posachas?
Okay.
Let's test that out. You know how that should therefore play out? That just like he needs it, but he didn't mention it, so his opponent also should be just not talking about it, but needing it, but not talking about it.
But just mention whether it's close or far.
That's the main point. That's different. Right. Talk about the main point. You say it has to be close with the posachas. I say it can be far away with the posachas. That's the main point. Close, far away. Not posachas. Posachas is a red herring in that respect. It's misleading. It makes it sound like you're talking, this one needs a posachas, this one doesn't. But you just told me, no. Rabbi Yehuda needs a posachas, but he just didn't mention it because they all have it.
Right.
Well, if that's true, then so by the same token, Rabbi Yossi didn't need to mention it either because they all have it.
But he did mention it though.
Which leads us to believe that they don't all have it.
They don't know that.
And if they don't all have it, then let's go back to Rabbi Yehuda.
Right.
Then it's wrong what you supposed about him as well. They don't all have it. And he didn't mention it. So now put two and two together. He didn't mention it, and they don't all have it, so you see, he doesn't need it. If they all have it, I can explain why he didn't mention it, if he really needs it.
Right.
But if they don't all have it, then he has to mention it. If he really needs it.
If I hear it a third time, I'll get it. And let me just start it off.
Yeah.
Rabbi Yehuda says it needs to be close to the city. He doesn't mention the key.
Right.
Because he knows that everyone knows that they
No,
all
but you're supposing. Just you have to make it clear.
Right.
Let's suppose that the reason why he didn't say it is that even though he really needs it, but he needs to talk about it because they all have it. The normal one has it.
But Rabbi Yossi says that it needs a key. Even the ones outside need a key. And by saying that, he didn't have to say that, right? He didn't have to say that because Rabbi Yehuda didn't have to say that either. Right? He assumed that they all have keys.
Right.
But by not saying it, he's actually telling me that he really doesn't have to have a key, which is why Rabbi Yehuda didn't mention it in the first place. Is that kind of...
Very close, very close. I gave you an 80 on the test, which is pretty good. Again,
I think I was going to stand in the corner there.
we either can suppose that the normal one has it or the normal one doesn't. Either way. Which way would you like to try? Let's try the first way. Let's decide the normal one has it. Okay?
Right. The normal enclosure has a key.
Yes.
Right.
And therefore, when Rabbi Yehuda says it needs to be samach, what he really meant is samach with a key.
Correct.
Why didn't he mention it? Because the normal ones have it.
Correct. Right.
So, if he is requiring both, okay?
Right. Yeah.
Let's take it from that point of view. He's requiring both.
Right.
So now, when Rabbi Yossi's talking to him, okay, he doesn't need to mention posachas, because first of all, they both agree on that, so why mention it if everyone agrees on it? Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And if the reason why Rabbi Yehuda didn't mention it is because you don't need to, because they all have it, then the same thing in Rabbi Yossi. You shouldn't need to mention it because they all have it.
Okay.
And therefore, Rabbi Yehuda needs it, but he didn't mention it because they all have it. Rabbi Yossi needs it, but he doesn't have to mention it because they all have it. So all we should really expect out of Rabbi Yossi's mouth is, you say it needs to be samach, I say it can be anywhere within the tchum. That's all he needs to say.
With a key.
No, he doesn't need to mention the
I
key.
didn't have to mention the key. Right.
If he needs to mention the key, why didn't Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda mention the key? We're supposing now you don't need to mention the key because they all have it.
But by mentioning it, he's basically saying we don't really need the key. Rabbi Yossi, by mentioning the keys, he's saying that they really don't need keys.
What do you mean they really don't? He's saying you need one.
I thought you said that by mentioning it.
By mentioning keys, you see that the norm is not to have a key.
Yeah.
Not that they need it or don't need it. The norm doesn't have it. The normal enclosure of their day had a key or not have a key?
According to Rabbi,
we have two possibilities. Don't say according to anyone yet. Just say there's two. The Gemora had a suffix. That was part of the suffix according to Rosh.
Right.
Do you say the normal enclosure had a key?
Yeah.
Therefore you don't need to mention it,
Right.
but you really need it,
Right.
but you don't need to mention it.
Right.
Or the normal one didn't have a key, so therefore you do need to mention it. It's a very simple question. The ones in their day normally had it, and therefore you don't need to mention it, or normally didn't have it, therefore you do need to mention it. It's simple. That part's straightforward.
Why would you need to mention it if they don't need it?
No, I didn't say they don't need it. They don't have it.
Or they don't have it. So why would you
It's like saying I buy a bicycle without a lock.
Yeah.
Therefore, I best get a lock if I want to keep that bicycle. But some people don't care.
Oh, okay. Okay.
What?
It's really rushy.
This whole Gemora is built on Rashi has given us all the information. That's why the Rashis here are not short, because Rashi knows there's very little Gemora here, and everything has to be explained to us. Rashi is not shirking his responsibility. Rashi is going head for what do you call it? Diving in head first. Okay, so
the fact that he did, that Rabbi Yossi mentioned it, he's saying,
first of all, without getting complicated, we just see a very simple fact. They don't all have it.
right.
Okay, that's just sort of a technical thing. We now see they don't all have it. That's why I needed to mention it, because they don't all have it.
So you're saying that we all have bicycles. Some don't have bicycles. You know what? You should get a lock. Someone will take that bicycle. I don't know if that fits the...
Maybe, I'm not sure. Let's just go on what the Rashi said. In order to say, which is one of the two ways of the Gemara of looking at it, that Rabbi Yehuda needs both close and posachas. In order to say that, in order to get away with that, we have to suppose that the normal enclosure of their day had a posachas. Okay. So if they're talking to each other, and supposedly they don't live in different countries and different continents. If in Rabbi Yehuda's world the normal one had it, therefore you didn't need to mention it. In Rabbi Yossi's world they also had it, you don't have to mention it. Simple. Okay. And if that would be true, we would say, really, Rabbi Yehuda is saying you need both, samach and posachas. Just he didn't need to mention posachas, they all have it. The normal one has it. He really needs it. If for some strange reason one doesn't have it, he will not let you use the enclosure, gather wood from an enclosure. But if that's really true, we said, then Rabbi Yossi also doesn't need to talk about it because the normal one has it.
Right.
And what's the real difference between Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda then, according to this approach? Does it have to be close, or can it be far away?
Right.
So then, that would have been extremely convenient for them to say. Rabbi Yehuda says it has to be close, and Rabbi Yossi should come along and say, no, it can be far away. If that's really what they're arguing about, that's what they should have said. Exactly what their point is. They should have concentrated in their words on what they meant. What are they really arguing about? Does it have to be close or can it be far away? The whole idea of a posachas is just a red herring because they all have posachas, right? So therefore you don't need to mention it. That's what Rabbi Yehuda didn't need to mention it. Rabbi Yossi didn't need to mention it. And what we really should have just found in the Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda says close to the city. Rabbi Yossi says even far away.
Okay.
But since we don't find that in Rabbi Yossi, such a simple formula, we understand there's more going on, because he doesn't just say it can be far away. He says it needs a posachas and it can be far away. Now we realize something more is going on. The first step is to realize our supposition was wrong. They did not all have posachas in their day. It was not the norm to have a posachas. As we said before, if it's a norm, then you don't need to mention it. So if he mentioned it, you could see that it's not the norm. That's pretty straightforward. Then we can say, okay, so now we just admitted it's not the norm to have a posachas. And if Rabbi Yehuda said it has to be samuch but did not mention posachas, now I can't say he didn't mention posachas because they all have it. It's not true anymore. I figured out that it's not true. So now I have to come to a different conclusion. Rabbi Yehuda didn't mention it because he doesn't need it, not because they all had it. So now I have Rabbi Yehuda saying, as long as it's samuch, I'm happy. You know why he didn't mention posachas? Because it doesn't need a posachas. Comes along Rabbi Yossi and he says, it needs a posachas. Okay? The Rashi said before, that's not going to apply to the samuch case. That's only the far away case. That's why he mentioned va'afilu b'sachatchu. Rashi already said that before. That if all he was really coming to do was argue with Rabbi Yehuda about samuch, then that's all he had to say, is that I need a posachas under all circumstances. Close, far away, anything.
And those are his two leniencies.
Those are his two leniencies. If it's close, I agree with you, Rabbi Yehuda, it doesn't need a posachas. But once it does have a posachas, I'm willing to be makel even another kula to let it be far away.
Which Rabbi Yehuda doesn't hold off.
No.
So he needs one, and he needs...
Excuse me?
Rabbi Yehuda needs one.
He only needs one chumrah.
And the other not.
The other doesn't even need that one, really.
It's very convoluted.
If you're saying that in a nice way, I can agree with you. You know, people always used to ask, how come it's so terse, how come they don't say what they mean, and so on. This is a classic Gemora, where without Rosh you would be completely lost.
Jews are so smart.
But, you know, now I think people can appreciate that. You don't want every person having free access to the, it's like a password, right? Today we have passwords and then you get hackers and messing everything up. We need, the Torah needs a password. We need to have someone with wisdom learning, and not just any old guy down the block.
We can understand why the Goyim don't read this. You need a Jewish cook.
I'm sure there are a few who try.
My wife always says, whenever we go to Gemora or anything, she always says, this is why Jews are so smart. Because they have to understand.
Well, that's why the South Koreans have a big issue with learning Gemora, because they want to be smart like the Jews.
Yeah.
All right, let's be smart and learn the Gemora. So, anyways, when this really comes back, I think we'll have to learn this up again. But if we want to, we could go on.
Where's Philly? He's away?
He went to South Africa for a few weeks. He'll be back hopefully, maybe even tonight. Tomorrow we'll see if he's able to come back after his jet lag. I mean, they don't really have jet lag from that, but it's just the weariness of the travel.
It's still, I think it's an 8-hour flight.
Yeah, very similar time zone.
Yeah.
Okay, so the Gemara just ends off with Amar Rav Sala, Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah,
Halacha Rabbi Yossi.
Halacha Rabbi Yossi lahakel. So it sounds like we should go learn Rabbi Yossi in both kulas from this wording. We should allow a person to gather in wood, whether it be far away with a posachas or close by without a posachas. That's what it sounds like. Obviously, the Gemora is a little bit complicated because at the very, very beginning of the Gemora, we had a different shita, Reb Shmuel's shita, which the Gemora said later he believes that he's saying like the Rabbanan, which is very different than our Mishnah, and he learns that it always has to have been gathered up the day before. There is no such thing as allowing a person to gather it up on Yom Tov, not because of the malacha of gathering per se, but because of the issue of muksa, supposedly. So he seems to be very machmir, and he feels that Beis Hillel would also be machmir. Of course, he's not passing like Beis Shammai. He's passing like in Beis Hillel, that Beis Hillel would also be machmir, even not like our Mishnah. So that complicates things. Because if you say at the end, Halacha Rabbi Yossi, we just said Rabbi Yossi is in our Mishnah, and we said he's actually very, very mekel in our Mishnah. And now we're saying, how could I put that together with Shmuel, who was even more machmer than our Mishnah? Seems like a very strange thing to end up with in the Gemora. And it almost looks like possibly both, because on the Shmuel, Amar Shmuel, at the beginning of the Gemora, where there's a big chumrah, there's a letter which seems to point that that's the halacha, to look in the Shulchan Aruch and the Rambam there. And then there's another letter to look on the Rambam and Shulchan Aruch on this that we just learned, Halacha Rabbi Yossi lahakel. It's not clear exactly what's going on. In any event, okay, shall we go on to the next Mishnah then?
Yep.
Knowing that we're probably going to have to do a bit of review, which would be welcome anyways. But let's just go on a bit, so we do get back to this, it'll be a little bit more familiar. You want to try it, Tuvia?
I can try it.
That's nice.
I can try it. So
That's nice.
I'm all good to try.
Let's try.
Yeah, let's try.
Like Avis, we
By
try
the way-
harder.
By the way, so this time at the Minyan, again there was people milling around, not doing anything, and I thought, well, they passed the time, everybody's standing around. So I said, okay, I'll go down again. There's nobody else down. I want to go back to my shir.
That's good for you. Good
So
for
I
you.
go up and say, Ashrei, and some guy comes up and goes, what's his watch? I said, what are you talking about? It's 42. He says, no, it's 49.
Well, you have every day. You have to look on the.
We jumped 7 minutes.
No, I believe he's wrong. But
Yeah.
before you walk into the menu, just glance at the wall.
Yeah.
They have the
wall,
calendar on the wall.
this wall,
The
yeah.
opposite side of this wall,
Yeah.
they have a big bulletin board. They have one calendar that gives exact timing of everything, including Shkia. And every day it is changing by a minute or so.
Yeah.
So it could be it's more than it was the other day, but it's certainly not more than a few minutes.
Yeah.
It's for 5:04 or 5:05.
Yeah.
It's that much.
Yeah.
Anyhow,
So-
there's always bound to be, I'm sure you find it wherever you've gone in life, there's always one guy who wants to act like he knows more than everyone.
And this guy claimed to be the Gabbai, but I didn't know there was a
Okay,
Gabbai.
so get his name, and
Yeah.
we'll ask Rabbi Moore if he's the real Gabbai.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Anyway,
why he
so
would say the time is not correct.
Yeah.
So you have to do two research
Have
projects.
to check the-
One, find his name, and the other, look at the wall.
See what the time
Yeah.
is. Yeah.
All right, now,
All right.
beyond that, let's try to do a little bit of Mishnah and Gemora before we leave. Ain.
Ein mevakim eitzim lo min hakora. Lo min hakora shenishbara biyom tov.
Remember we saw this Shabbatai once before? You see a note on the side, Le'el Beis Amid Beis.
Yeah.
The Gemora had
Shabbat.
brought this to try to show how we hold in this Masechta on Muksa. Okay, so this will be an interesting, hopefully we'll see how the Gemora now learns it, because there it was in Rav Nachman's approach, and the Gemora rejected Rav Nachman's approach actually. But this seemed to be true according to everyone, but I guess we'll find out. So how would you translate this?
You would say, we do not chop wood,
In other words, we're not allowed to chop
not
wood.
allowed to chop wood, not from beams, and not from a beam that broke on Yom Tov.
Okay, so what are these beams? Let's assume that's connected to the previous mission. Is that a good assumption or a bad assumption? It's a good assumption. Why is it a good assumption? Because, first of all, one Mishnah after the other may very well be related material, right? In our Gemora, it's broken up by a Gemora, discussion in the Gemora, but in the Mishnayos, if you open up a Mishnayos, which is always refreshing to do, to see what we've been learning just as presenting in Mishnayos, sometimes you see that what we look as two different Mishnayos could be the same Mishnah even. That's sometimes how you see it in Mishnayos. But even if it is two separate Mishnayos, it normally, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi put together the Mishnayos, part of his brilliance was to relate everything together. That's why we call it Seder HaMishnayos. Right? What Shas, Shisha, Sidre Mishnah. Part of his brilliance was to be Masader in the right way. So, you know, like any editor, the wording is important, but the order is also important. They even say in the Rambam, when you learn a Rambam, I heard this, that Gedolim knew this secret, and they taught, based on this, that when you have a Shver Rambam, famous Shver Rambam that everyone tries to say a shir on a Shver Rambam, it's almost always dependent on how the previous Rambam was. Because the previous Rambam, again, is related, it's an order, he's setting an order to teach you something. So here, it's an order. So if it's true, then just like we talked about before, gathering in wood, what was the main issue?
Whether it was either.
That's technical. What was the main issue?
Or whether you could gather with it.
No, that depended on how you look at what's the major problem. Let's say, no, just a second. We said if it's in a field, open field, it has to be piled up from the day before. Why?
Because it has to be organized.
Why?
It has to be planned.
Because then
it's not muksa.
So the main point is muksa. Okay? You have an item that should have been muksa, but if you do X, Y, and Z to it from beforehand, or it's in a certain situation from beforehand, then it takes away the problem of muksa. But the main point is muksa. So if that's the main subject before, what do I need to take away muksa? What do I need to be matter this and say it's not a problem of muksa? Maybe that's similarly here as well. So then let's take it from that point of view. If that's really true, then I could read the Mishnah with a slightly better understanding. We're not allowed to what?
We're not allowed to chop wood.
Not because there's a problem with actually chopping. Not because the chopping action is a problem, but because in order to chop wood, you have to move the wood.
That's right.
And that would require moving something that might be muksa. Now, do you think it's actually saying you can't chop any wood? So really, on Yom Tov, we're not allowed to chop any wood?
No,
all wood is muksa?
No, it's beams. It's beams.
Oh.
It's beams because they were part of a beam is not really a piece of wood that you chop from the ground. It's something that's already manufactured.
You know, we call that in English lumber.
Lumber, yeah.
Right? And there's a lumber yard.
Right.
Where the guy who owns the lumber yard does not want all of his friends coming in on Yom Tov
and chopping up his wood.
And taking his wood and chopping it up. And they say, look, I'll pay you a nickel for every piece of wood. And with nickel, I make hundreds of dollars on these beams of wood.
That's
right? Lumber is expensive. Because it's been honed down to the point where you can use it to create a proper building. So it's a whole different ball game. So if we read it like that, if you read it like a Talmid Chacham, let's hear you read it like a Talmid Chacham, the Mishnah is teaching us a Yesod that what? We're not allowed to take
like processed wood and cut it up on,
because that is muksa. That's a different kind of muksa. What kind of muksa would you call that? Muksa machmas, chisaron, kis. We had this a few pages ago. Right? The real problem with this muksa is more that nobody wants to lose
value,
their money. Right? Something's a very expensive item. You don't want to just use it for what we call mabakach, for normal run-of-the-mill stuff. So what's the second chiddush then? And not even from a koresh and nishbara.
Means not even a piece that broke, because the piece that broke is still a piece of manufactured.
So we could say, what's not? Of course not, because if it was muksa when Yom Tov came in, because it was a regular beam,
it's still
what does it help that it broke?
Yeah, that's right.
So we have to figure out what the Havamina was. If I already know I'm not allowed to use lumber, so what it would help if it broke, right? Because like anything that starts out muksa is still
They're
muksa.
saying it that way because if it breaks, it loses value. So why does the guy even care if somebody touches
He
it?
might not care, but if it started out Yom Tov as muksa, can it start being non-muksa in the middle of Shabbos, in the middle of Yom
I
Tov?
don't think so, but maybe some people do think so. That's why he has to point it out.
Maybe, or maybe this is a special case.
Yeah.
Why we think here is different. Okay, that's why we're going to have to discuss this in the Gemora.
Yeah.
And then it says, now we start talking about different problems.
Right, and that's really what you can do.
You want to finish off the Mishnah Shabbatai? Mevakim, like medabrim.
We don't chop lo kar
Dum.
with a chopper.
Like a cleaver, I think. It's like a cleaver.
It's an axe, right?
I think a cardin might be a cleaver, I'm not sure.
Here he translates as an axe.
Okay.
Lo the magara.
Megera.
It's some other kind of
So now, are we talking about regular wood? We're just saying don't, even on regular wood, you have a restriction on what kind of implements you're allowed to use? Is that what it's saying? So that would be very strange. I can't chop wood with an axe on Yom Tov? Pretty strange, right? If it's not muksa wood, if it's the kind of wood that we've been talking about till now, there's plenty of wood that's not muksa, right? And I can't chop that up with an axe? What am I going to use? My bare hands? Alright, to use the wood as it is, I have to chop it from the day before. What's wrong with chopping wood? Is it the act of chopping here or the implement? Seems like the implement to me. If it's the implement, I don't understand what's wrong with using an axe. An axe is an implement for chopping wood. Why wouldn't it be proper to use it for chopping wood?
It's an instrument that you use during the week.
So what are you going to use instead of an axe? What could you use to chop wood instead of an axe?
Something that you don't normally use.
Like your stender. Take your stender and just start bashing the wood.
All right. Rashi has something to say.
Let's see, keep going.
Okay.
Below Megera, whatever that is. Magal is a sickle. Ella be kofitz. That's the cleaver, I think.
That's a butcher's cleaver, yeah.
So it turns out when you have to use a butcher's cleaver. I'm sure every butcher's going to be hitting the roof. You want to use my cleaver to chop your wood? Forget it.
You have to buy your own,
right? I don't know. It's pretty strange.
Maybe it's the butcher that's chopping the wood.
I don't know. I think a lot of people have an axe to grind over here.